The following morning arrived, and Ian got ready to head back to the capital. One of the knights came up to him and said all preparations were done, and they could leave now. Ian felt disappointed because he still hadn't received an answer from the alchemist. He assumed it was a rejection. As he was about to leave, the door opened, and Lidio and Douglas emerged. They had made a decision to join after all, as they didn't have any other options. Douglas looked at Ian and asked if he could really cure his father's curse. Ian smiled and promised to keep his end of the deal. This made Douglas happy, and he decided to call Ian boss from now on, which Ian found a bit strange but allowed. One of the knights suggested they head back to the Lord's castle immediately because word had just come in that Prince Hayden had crossed the river and would arrive shortly. Ian was surprised by their quick arrival and that they had only just been contacted. He told the knight that he would need to borrow his horse to make it back in time. He approached the powerful steed and used his magic to tame it, asking it to take him back to the castle as fast as possible. The horse lowered itself, allowing Ian to climb onto the saddle. Once on its back, he turned to the alchemist and the others, telling them to take their time as he prepared to ride off into the distance. We shift to Prince Hayden, who was traveling in a white carriage surrounded by soldiers. Inside the carriage, Hayden seemed deep in thought, recalling a conversation he had with his father before he left. His father had warned him that one of the other princes was getting close to Tower Master Herbert, who had significant influence in deciding which prince would succeed to the throne. His father emphasized that Herbert currently favored the fifth prince, Ragnar, for the crown. The emperor told Hayden that if he didn't want to lose his position to his brother, he needed to do his best to win Ian to their side. As Hayden thought about this conversation in the carriage, he grew stressed. He was frustrated that the magicians at Ivory Tower didn't support his claim to the throne and instead favored his brother Ragnar. He began contemplating what he would do when he became emperor, vowing to get rid of the magicians at Ivory Tower, including their tower master, Herbert. It was later revealed that Prince Hayden deliberately withheld information about his visit to Lord Marcus until just 2 days before his arrival. He chuckled to himself, curious about how the esteemed Mowglian lord would manage to prepare with such short notice. Frankly, Hayden seemed like a rather unpleasant individual, to be honest. At Lord Marcus's castle, chaos ensued as the news spread. Marcus hurriedly instructed his maids to ensure that not even a speck of dust remained, striving for perfection to welcome the prince. He had no prior knowledge of their imminent arrival and little time to prepare. Butler Hogger approached him, delivering the news that most of their party had arrived, with the prince not far behind. However, they still couldn't locate our protagonists, and it appeared that they might not make it in time. Marcus held his head, realizing that he would have to greet Prince Hayden without Ian, who was the main reason for the visit. Hayden's carriage soon pulled up, led by numerous horses and knights. He disembarked as if he were walking down a red carpet, wearing a long white cape and a blue jacket. Marcus remained nervous, knowing that our protagonist was still missing. Fortunately, at the last moment, the horse carrying Ian arrived, with Ian appearing as though he had been sleeping. He raised his head and offered apologies for his tardiness. Ian dismounted the horse and joined Marcus in welcoming Prince Hayden, who looked down at him and inquired if he was the child magician everyone had been talking about. Ian remained silent, taking a moment to observe Prince Hayden's face, and recognizing some of the guests he had come with, including a girl named Cecilia, who had been a spy from another empire in his previous life. As everyone entered the castle, we saw Hayden sipping on some wine next to a knight, the captain of the Second Imperial Knight Order, named Oliver. Prince Hayden expressed his displeasure with everything at the gathering, except for the wine. He also didn't seem to have a favorable opinion of our protagonist, Ian. Oliver wisely kept his silence, not wanting to provoke the prince further. Meanwhile, within the castle, Cecilia, a spy from the Coalwood Empire, had received orders to verify the rumors about Ian. If they proved true, she was tasked with capturing both him and his mother and returning them to the Coalwood Empire. Unable to find Ian, she began wandering the castle in search of him and eventually spotted him outside at the training grounds. It was the middle of the night, and Cecilia had a mischievous smile on her face as she sneaked up on Ian. She wanted to test his strength, as she'd heard rumors about it. Cecilia decided to play a little prank and cast a weak magic attack on him. Magic missiles rained down on Ian, but he reacted quickly by putting up a shield. He turned around, asking her why she'd greet him like that. Cecilia grinned and explained that it was just a prank on her junior. However, Ian's tone became serious as he addressed her by her full name, Cecilia Coldwalker. Her smile faded as she realized that her cover was blown. She asked Ian how he knew her name, and he wore a sinister expression. He knew her name because he had eliminated all the Cold Walker spies hidden in the Empire in his previous life. Ian began to list the names of the spies present, leaving Cecilia shocked and backing away, thinking Ian was crazy. Eventually, Cecilia called her a kid and smiled and prepared to launch a fire attack, sending a curtain of flames where Ian had stood. She believed Ian was dead until he emerged unscathed from the flames, smoke evaporating from his body. Ian charged up his own magic attack, leaving Cecilia wide-eyed and wondering who this powerful kid was. The moon was obscured by a cluster of ice crystals, and Ian told Cecilia that he had been expecting her. He'd been waiting for her at the training grounds. Ian raised his hand, ice crystals appeared above him. Ian launched the ice crystals like bullets. Cecilia reacted quickly, putting up a shield to protect herself, but the force of Ian's attacks began to crack it. Ian wasn't done. He created a massive fireball in his hand and pushed it towards Cecilia. It was 3 times his size. Cecilia gritted her teeth and hoped for the best as her shield slowly broke down. Some of the attacks broke through, causing wounds on her arms and legs. Realizing she couldn't keep it up, Cecilia released her shield and tried to dodge the incoming fireball. She collapsed, grateful to be alive, her body covered in wounds and a cut on her cheek. She thought Ian's mana should be depleted by now and hoped someone would arrive soon after hearing the commotion, ensuring her safety. Ian slowly approached and said he was going to reveal Cecilia as a spy to everyone. Cecilia smiled, knowing there was no evidence to support such a claim, and it was unlikely that people would believe a kid like him. Ian smiled too, claiming he had evidence about the Cold Walker spies that she didn't even know about. Soon, Knight Captain Oliver arrived with others and asked what had happened. People rushed over to check on Cecilia's injuries and helped her up from the floor. Ian spoke up, admitting that he had caused all the injuries. Everyone turned to look at him in surprise. He continued by making up a story about seeing Cecilia talking to someone wearing a mask. According to Ian, when Cecilia spotted him, she tried to harm him to keep him quiet. Oliver found it hard to believe, but Ian insisted he had proof. Apparently, Cecilia had a special marking on her body, a brand that all Cold Walker spies had. Ian demanded that Cecilia be searched for this marking, which caused an uproar. 2 men stood in front of her, claiming that they were just magicians sent by the ivory tower. However, Oliver drew his sword and stated that the prince was present and that he needed to get to the bottom of the incident to ensure the prince's safety. He signaled for other knights to search Cecilia. After the search, Cecilia looked unhappy, with blood still covering her clothes and severe injuries requiring immediate medical attention. The knights reported to Oliver that they couldn't find any markings on her body. Oliver turned to Ian, wanting to know if he had been lying. Ian assured him he wasn't and cast a magic spell, emitting a blue light from his fingertips. To everyone's surprise, the marking he had mentioned appeared on the back of Cecilia's neck, a circle with a triangle in the center and strange symbols. Cecilia didn't even know she had this marking. Ian smiled to himself, explaining that Cold Walkers were branded with this mark from birth, even without their knowledge. He had learned this information in his previous life after interrogating an administrator. Oliver and the others were shocked, not knowing the meaning of the marking or having seen it before. Given the circumstances, Oliver decided to tend to Cecilia's wounds first and interrogate her later. He instructed 2 other magicians to prepare a mana prison to prevent her from escaping temporarily. Then, he turned to Ian with a serious expression, the stars shining in the night sky behind him, and his sword gleaming in its sheath. If everything Ian had said that day turned out to be true, then Oliver said he would report it to His Majesty right away. And that's exactly what he did. He went straight to Prince Hayden and told him how our heroes managed to defeat Cecilia, a third-class magician. Hayden was impressed and didn't expect the child to be that strong. He asked Oliver what he thought of Ian. Oliver said it seemed like the rumors about his skills were true, but the way he spoke and acted was unusual for a child. The prince wanted to meet and talk to the boy himself. It didn't take long for Oliver to find Ian and bring him to the room. Ian lowered his head and greeted the prince respectfully. Based on what Hayden had heard, our hero had discovered that one of the magicians sent by the ivory tower was a spy for the Cold Wood. Since Ian exposed the spy and defeated her in battle, Hayden said he had contributed greatly to the Empire and wanted to reward him. He asked if there was anything specific Ian wanted. Ian became suspicious, thinking that the prince must be asking to find out what he was up to. Ian looked up and said that if the prince was okay with it, he would like to visit the old ivory tower site on the way to the imperial castle. Hayden was puzzled, wondering why this kid wanted to visit the old, abandoned ivory tower site as a reward. There wasn't much to see there. However, he ended up agreeing when Ian said it was a place he had only heard about and had always wanted to visit. Ian smugly smiled to himself. It looked like he was going to be able to go there much sooner than he thought. In the deepest basement of the old ivory tower site, there was an item known as the Dragon Tongue Book. The book contained the records of the essence of time magic. It played a crucial role in his research on time magic in his previous life. He had found it a few years before he died, but he had only been able to understand a very small part of it. He wondered how much he would be able to comprehend if he studied it from this young age. Nightfall came quickly, and everyone began their long journey to the Emperor's imperial castle. Ian's mother, Vanessa, was excited. This was her first time traveling so far. Lidio, the alchemist, began to flirt, saying he would be Vanessa's guide when they reached the capital. Even though he didn't look like it, he had lived and worked in the capital for a long time. Vanessa blushed and thanked the alchemist for being so kind, while Ian remained silent, wondering why this guy was flirting with his mother. They were interrupted by the vice-captain of the knights, named Paul. He had green eyes and a blue ribbon around his uniform. He said they had arrived at their detour to the old ivory tower site. They would be staying there for 2 days, and during this time, Ian could explore the historical site whenever he wished. Paul led everyone to a nearby village to provide them with accommodations for the next couple of days. The village appeared quiet and charming, without any extravagance. It wasn't the kind of place you'd expect royalty to visit. The commoners warmly welcomed the prince when he arrived, expressing their honor of having him there. Hayden, in return, thanked them for their kindness. Ian was surprised by the prince's friendliness towards the common people. In his previous life, the prince had always been hostile towards Ian, appearing gloomy and giving him unfriendly looks. This was because Ian used to be with his brother, Prince Ragnar, who was trying to take the future emperor's position. However, in this life, Hayden was seen smiling and engaging in conversations with commoners who weren't of noble or royal status. Ian began to understand why the current emperor held Hayden in high regard. Suddenly, Douglas called out Ian's name, asking when he planned to go into the old ivory tower. He wanted to accompany Ian. Ian hesitated, knowing that he probably wouldn't be able to find the book in the basement with Douglas around. However, he couldn't bring himself to say no, and he agreed. Douglas was visibly excited about the prospect. Their parents watched them from a distance, pleased to see their children getting along. Lidio turned to Vanessa and asked if Ian had always been so mature. Vanessa revealed that Ian had matured early, often reminding her of her late husband. He was thoughtful and considerate, trying to fill the void left by his father's absence. Vanessa remembered how her husband, Fran, had disappeared one day while going to work before Ian was even born. He had left behind a collection of items that they only received 5 years after his disappearance. As Vanessa continued to observe her son, she struggled to express her concerns. Lidio tried to comfort her, but Vanessa brushed it off as probably nothing. They prepared for bed as the next day promised to be a busy one. In Ian's previous life, he had roamed aimlessly, guided by the wind and stars after the unifying war had ended, and he had left the ivory tower and the emperor's side. He had spent his days traveling without a specific destination in mind. It was during this time that he stumbled upon the old ivory tower site and the book in the basement. He wondered if it had been a mere coincidence, or if something had drawn him there. Now, he stood in the same place, inhabiting his childhood body. The location remained unchanged, just as it had been 300 years ago when a war between the ivory tower magicians and the dragon's descendants, known as the Dragonians, had taken place. The Dragonians, with their formidable gargoyle squad and powerful black magic, had posed a significant threat to the Empire. A skilled magician named Mitchell, who was also the prince of the Empire at the time, once led the ivory tower. They actively worked to control the Dragonians and defeat the gargoyles, all in an effort to maintain peace within the Empire. After the war, Mitchell declined the offer to become the emperor and instead became the ivory tower master. He constructed a new tower in the current capital, leaving the old one abandoned. Over time, people lost interest in the old tower, and it fell into disrepair. Ian, in his current life, explores the ruins of the tower, searching for a specific spot he remembers from his previous life. When he finds it, he uses magic to open a secret passage. This passage leads to a dark room with a long staircase going down. Ian follows it, and at the bottom, uses his magic again to illuminate the room, hidden from sunlight. In front of him stands a gargoyle statue with spread wings and sharp teeth. Ian had been surprised to see this statue before, but now he's prepared. Suddenly, the gargoyle comes to life, its eyes glowing purple, and it lets out a deafening roar. It leaps toward Ian. In his previous life, he had no idea that the gargoyle he fought went extinct 300 years ago. However, now things are different, and he uses his magic to summon a ball of water, launching it at the stone monster. The attack strikes the gargoyle in the chest, sending it flying back to crash into a nearby wall. Although it's not dead, Ian realizes he needs to use more power. The gargoyle charges again, and Ian readies his next attacks. He summons ice spears to pierce the gargoyle's rocky body and uses a lightning attack to zap the beast with bolts of yellow electricity from above. It appears to have done the trick, and the gargoyle stops moving, surrounded by ice and emitting smoke. After defeating the gargoyle, another secret passage opens up to Ian's right, just as he expected. He jumps into the hole, using his magic to prevent fall damage. He has found what he came for, the book, sitting alone on a nearby surface with a beam of light shining down on it. Ian has reached the Great Dragon Tongue book sooner than he anticipated. He doesn't know who placed it here, whether the dragons or the first magician, but that doesn't matter. It's him now. Ian holds the book in his hand, but to his surprise it's written in the dragon tongue, an unknown language he couldn't fully decipher in his previous life. If he can understand it now, there will be no limit to his power. However, when he opens the book, he discovers that all its pages are empty. He frantically flips through it, wondering what could have happened. It occurs to him that the pages are probably empty because he already used the book in his previous life, likely erasing everything. Ian closes the book in disappointment. Despite this, he still remembers some of the magic that was written in the book and tries to recite it. To his surprise, he can't get his voice to speak the dragon tongue. It's a language deeply rooted in magic, requiring strong magical abilities to utter. Ian gazed at the book, lost in thought. It meant he couldn't use the time magic in it again, which also meant he couldn't go back to the past. He had hoped to keep trying, but that wasn't an option. Suddenly, his second chance at life felt much weightier, and he knew he had to take it seriously. After a few days, he set off for the capital to meet the emperor. Looking out of his carriage window, he saw tall stone buildings and happy citizens. He glanced at another carriage he'd been traveling with, and in the back was a cage. Inside it was Cecilia. Ian understood he needed to make sure she didn't escape. If she did, she'd return to the Coldwood Empire and spill their secrets, causing problems for them. As the party continued toward the capital and the imperial castle, they were stopped by Herbert, the tower master, and a line of magicians. Herbert demanded they halt. Oliver, getting off his horse, questioned Herbert's authority to block their path. The tower master explained he had a direct order regarding Cecilia's investigation. Oliver was suspicious, wondering how Herbert managed to secure an imperial order before Cecilia even arrived in the capital. Herbert placed his hand on Oliver's shoulder, emphasizing the need to swiftly deal with rebellions, stating that the ivory tower would handle the interrogation. Oliver, sensing something wasn't right, instructed his men to hand Cecilia over to the tower master. When Herbert heard the term criminal, he turned around sternly, asserting that she hadn't been proven guilty yet and should be treated like any other magician. He cautioned Oliver to watch his words with her. The other knights were also displeased with the situation. They had worked hard to capture Cecilia, and now the ivory tower magicians were taking her away. Ian understood what was happening. The ivory tower wasn't trying to protect Cecilia just because she was a magician. They simply didn't want the knights interrogating one of their own. He knew Herbert would likely lock Cecilia up in the deepest prison, making it nearly impossible for her to escape. He looked out of the carriage, his mother seemingly unconcerned that Cecilia was being taken away. Someone approached our main character, saying they had to visit one more place before going to the Imperial Palace. They went to a grand mansion with a central water fountain. Ian recognized the mansion from his past life, a gift from the fifth Prince Ragnar. However, this time, Prince Hayden was the one giving it to him. Hayden mentioned that the Emperor had made special arrangements for Ian to have the mansion during his stay. Ian felt grateful, lowered his head, and thanked Prince Hayden for his generosity. In his previous life, Ian hadn't received the mansion until he was 26, but now, as a child, it was being given to him. Hayden informed Ian that his family could stay with him in the mansion for the time being, but they needed to head to the Imperial Palace to meet the Emperor. Ian agreed but asked if he could show his mother around their new mansion first. Hayden agreed, and Ian took his mother inside. She was amazed by everything she saw. The place was not only grand but also luxurious. Ian then revealed that this would be their new home. He wanted to make his mother happy and live a normal life with her this time, even though he couldn't use his magical abilities to bring her back to life. Vanessa, Ian's mother, couldn't believe the size of the mansion and worried about how she would clean it. Ian assured her that she wouldn't have to do any housework and that she would be comfortable in their new home. The mansion was beautiful, with many windows, white brick walls, and a blue roof. However, it was time for Ian to meet the Emperor. He headed to the Imperial Palace, a massive and symmetrical structure with red banners hanging in various places. Ian was nervous because, in his previous life, he never had the chance to meet the current Emperor. By the time he had graduated from the Magic Academy, the Emperor was already on his deathbed. Ian was looking forward to learning about this wise and judgmental ruler. While walking through the palace, Ian noticed a familiar room across the courtyard, the room of the fifth Prince Ragnar. Ragnar had been both a friend and an enemy in Ian's past life, a cold-blooded and merciless figure who had poisoned him. Ian clenched his fist, wondering how he would deal with Ragnar this time. Upon entering, Ian immediately kneels down to the ground as a humble servant. He wishes the Emperor health and peace. Emperor Terry tells him not to. Ian tried so hard to rise, and he achieved so much in such a short time. He didn't need to use manners, just doing as he was told. He remembered that Prince Ragnar had said the same thing to him in their previous life when they first met. Next to Terry, his son, Prince Hayden, waved and smiled, asking if Ian liked his new mansion. He did. It was more luxurious than he had ever imagined. Sweat dripped down his face as he remained nervous in the presence of the royals. Terry asked if Ian knew the reason he had been brought here and why he was given a mansion upon arrival. Ian didn't know what to say. Should he be direct and speak his mind, or should he hold back and be respectful? He remembered people like Prince Ragnar who appreciated honesty and straightforwardness, but he ultimately decided it was too soon to act confidently. For now, he should just continue acting like a 12-year-old. He replied to the Emperor's question, saying that he thought he had been brought in because he had some talent. Terry folded his arms and asked if Ian really believed he had gone through all this trouble just because his magic abilities were unusual. Hayden scolded his father to be more patient, reminding him that Ian was just a child who didn't know much about politics. Terry conceded that it was true. He had called Ian here because he thought highly of his talents, and because Ian had been a great help to the Empire in catching a spy. The Emperor, sitting on his throne, stated that Ian should be rewarded for his achievements, regardless of his age, and that's why he was there. He asked Ian what he wanted. Ian looked down at the floor. He had been expecting a reward from the Emperor and had spent a lot of time thinking about it. If he were an adult, what he was about to ask wouldn't make sense, but since he was just a child, he could get away with it. He told Terry that he would like to go sightseeing around the Imperial Palace so he could tell his mother about all the beautiful things he saw. The Emperor found this request a little unusual, but Hayden informed him that Ian had also asked to go sightseeing at the old ivory tower, and it must be a passion of his. After all, it's normal for children to be curious. Terry granted Ian's wish and handed him an imperial seal, golden and shaped like a ticket. Ian could use this to access most of the Imperial Palace, and if he showed it to a royal guard, they could guide him around. The Emperor mentioned that there were more rewards for Ian, and his servants brought in a giant chest filled with gold. Ian couldn't believe it. It looked like his mother wouldn't have to worry about cleaning anymore. He thanked the Emperor for his kindness and left, closing the door behind him. The Emperor was certainly different from the others, and Ian couldn't help but think he was suspicious of him. Ian assumed that the Emperor must be like that with everyone, just like Ragnar was. For now, Ian needed to get moving. He didn't have much time. He wanted to use his imperial seal, so he went outside and showed it to a guard, asking if he could show him the way to the garden. The guard obliged, and after some help, Ian arrived at the place he wanted to go, the imperial family's safe haven. He remembered it from his previous life. Ragnar described it as a sacred place where people would serve the Emperor and Empress, and only the most elite could enter. Ian sneaked inside, peering around a corner to see if there were any guards. There were a few, but they were all asleep, seemingly the worst guards ever. Ian sneaked up to them, and used his magic to ensure they remained unconscious. Then, he began to explore, looking for something. It wasn't clear what he was searching for, but he knew it had to be somewhere near the first emperor's coffin. It took a while, checking everywhere using his magic to light the way, until he eventually found it. His eyes grew wide, unable to believe what he was seeing. He found some stoneheart mushrooms, which were brown and sticking out of the ground next to a coffin. Ian hurried over to gather them, putting them in a brown bag, thinking it should be enough for his needs. Suddenly, he heard two people talking nearby, approaching. He quickly turned off his magic light, hid, and wondered who they could be. It turned out to be a magician named Kevin and Princess Harry. Princess Harry had long blonde hair and wore a blue jacket over a white dress. Kevin seemed worried about being in that place, and Ian secretly watched them for a while. Kevin thought the ivory tower should know about their activities, but Harry insisted on keeping it a secret, saying it would be too dangerous. Kevin asked if she remembered the basic spells he had taught her, and she demonstrated her magic powers by summoning a ball of light. Ian was shocked because he didn't know Princess Harry could use magic. He remembered her from his past life when she was in a cage like a bird. When Ragnar became emperor and executed Prince Hayden, it broke her heart, and she eventually took her own life. Ian couldn't believe that she was a magician and was hiding it from everyone in the empire. Hiding magical abilities from the ivory tower was a serious crime. Kevin must have known this but agreed to help her practice magic secretly. They were in this secluded place to avoid getting caught. Ian left the scene quietly, and when Kevin and Harry heard a noise, they decided to end their practice early. Harry assured Kevin that only the imperial family could enter, so they were likely alone. Ian continued with his day, leaving the garden and thanking the guard who had shown him the way earlier. The guard asked if he had enjoyed himself, and Ian replied with a smile, saying he did. He returned to his new mansion, ready to use the mushrooms he had found. Inside the mansion, a butler greeted him, took his jacket, and informed him that Vanessa was in another room with new maids from the Emperor, while Douglas was exploring the mansion. Ian was relieved to hear that everyone was doing well and asked to speak with the alchemist, Lidio, privately. They entered a secluded room, and Ian, with a serious expression, asked if Lidio could make a secret potion for him. Lidio was confused and eager to understand what kind of potion was needed and why it was such a secret. Our main character pulled out some stoneheart mushrooms he had recently gathered. These mushrooms had the power to numb nerves and could even stop a heart. He showed them to Lidio, but this only left the alchemist more bewildered. He couldn't fathom how to make a potion from something so poisonous. His purple eyes showed his bewilderment, and his white streaked hair fell over his face. Ian explained that he needed a potion to make him immune to interrogation magic. This kind of magic allowed magicians to determine if someone was telling the truth or lying. He stood in front of Lidio and asked if this was something he could create. Lidio had heard of interrogation magic before but wasn't sure if it was possible to concoct a potion to counter it. He mentioned that it would require many experiments and take some time. Our protagonist expected such a response, knowing this was not an easy request. He told the alchemist to do his best and take the time he needed. While they were discussing this, someone knocked on the room door. Ian opened it to find a maid holding a tray with a letter addressed to him from the ivory tower. The letter expressed the tower's eagerness to meet him, acknowledging his exceptional magical abilities. Reading the letter made Ian a bit worried. If he was to visit the ivory tower soon, he needed the potion quickly. He changed his previous statement and urged Lidio to expedite the potion's creation, emphasizing that he needed it before his meeting at the ivory tower in a week. Lidio felt overwhelmed, thinking it might be impossible, even if he sacrificed sleep. He wondered how he could complete it in time. Ian apologized but remained confident in Lidio's abilities, emphasizing that going to the ivory tower without the potion would be perilous. That concludes part 2 of this recap. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. What will happen next? If you would like to see a part 3 of this manhwa, let us know in the comments section below. Till next time.